County Fiscal Court. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bartleman.
Here.
Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Parker.
Here.
Judge Clymer.
Here. Commissioner Bartleman, you offer the prayer for us.
Yeah. Father, we thank you for the blessings of this day. We thank you for the opportunity we have to serve this community. We just pray you be with us as we deliberate the issues that are important to them. Father, we just pray for our first responders, for our police, our fire departments, our ambulance workers, our sheriff deputies, our sheriff, coroner, and all others. Father, just be with them that they may have safe journey as they perform the duties to make this a safe community. Again, we're just so thankful for what you do. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Get out of the chair. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Stop at your chair. Huh? Somebody stole the rollers off the chair. Wheels on those.
Maybe you way too much now.
They just don't work under heavy load.
It makes you shorter and me taller, so that makes us.
Let's see how that works out. All right, let's see. First off, we have the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move it.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. We have a budget transfer. Madam Treasurer.
It is ordered that the necessary cash transfers in the amount of $404,468.95 be made in order to pay county bills and payroll approved October 28, 2019.
Okay. Motion.
So
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries.
Mr. Chairman, we need to do the minutes too. That wasn't on the agenda. We need to do the minutes.
Was it not on the? It's not on the consent.
It's in the
Consent. I'm sorry. Never mind.
I think it is. Should,
It is.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay,
It's
never
A
mind.
on the consent. Accounts payable.
It's not on consent.
It is ordered to approve the vouchers claims register from October 14, 2019 to October 28, 2019 to show county bills in the amount of $213,796.16 were paid.
Motion.
So made.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, let's vote on this, and I've got a question.
Okay. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
Why
Carries.
would transfers more than bills this month?
To cover payroll.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Then on item 4, discussion, renovations to Carson Park. Who wanted to tackle that?
I'll be happy to start the conversation.
Okay.
I guess I'm wanting to start a conversation. I think we've been having a conversation about Carson Park and things that we can do to improve both its function and appearance. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me and an iPhone and my abilities on a camera. But the first picture, and I think Derek, I gave you a copy, is at least a layman's attempt at trying to expand what we could see at Fuller Hall. I may be reaching a little bit when I compare it to Calumet Farms, but it's the best starting point I've got. I'd like us to consider replacing the chain link fence, putting on our horizon improvements to Fuller Hall to make it look more and feel more like when you drive down 28th Street, that we are passing a Lexington horse farm as opposed to a penitentiary, which is kind of what I think it sort of resembles now. It's not maybe not quite that, but the chain link fence does not give it the picture that I think we could create with really very little money. So I am proposing that we ask PACRO to approve, and I've been told I think they will approve, starting a seed contribution of $50,000. And I think Mr. Doolittle has been working on some estimates. We're going to need more than 50 to do some of what we're talking about, but 50 will get us started on changing the fence out. I believe the tie to economic development is the fact that community development is economic development. And if you don't do it, then you don't get that wow factor. This could very easily look so much nicer, could look more like a college campus or something on a college campus. I believe if you drive to the back of Carson Park, you will see, I think you can blame, or I would blame, at least partially blame, maybe entirely blame, some of the failures of the back neighborhoods, which I would consider blighted, on the way Carson Park has not been, well, I guess just the appearance of Carson Park. And I think if we change Carson Park, it may change the future of those neighborhoods over time.
Any more discussion about it?
I think our first goal should be to try to resolve some of the issues in the deed and the restrictions that exist there. And if we can make changes in that, and then we can kind of decide what we want to do with Carson Park, how we want to develop that. Because I think it's got a lot of possibilities. And I'm willing to consider using PACRO money, but I would have to be convinced that's the best use of that money.
So we've got about $400,000 in our PACRO money now. And I guess with regard to the deed, and I brought a copy of the deed and the restrictions, and I can tell you that I've researched it. I don't think that I think there's going to be a slim chance of modifying the deed restrictions through legal action. The best way to modify the deed restrictions would be in a resolution that included the beneficiary of the failure to comply with those deed restrictions, which is Easter seals. But I don't, based upon my preliminary conversations with Easter seals, I don't think they're at this point interested in conveying their future contingent interest. And so I think we're stuck with the restrictions. And we've been living with those restrictions since 1937. And I think if we wait for some resolution of those deed restrictions, we'll be having the same conversation 100 years from now.
I'm just wondering if I'm sure that if we can't get Easter seals on board to make a change, maybe we could get them to agree to make a change on the purpose of the facility so that it's not so restrictive. I think that's the main thing we need to do. If they're still the secondary beneficiary of it, I think that'd be fine, but I think the issue should be that things have changed today from what they were in the 1930s when this deed was written. There was more of a need back then for facilities for livestock shows and horse shows and housing horses. And I just wonder if there's some way we might be able to just change the priorities of its use and keep the Easter seals as the secondary, because it would be difficult for that.
Yeah.
I remember when I first came to Paducah, the stalls out there were, I think, pretty well full. Anytime you went out there were people training horses. I think the barns were full back in the early 70s, and it served its purpose. But now there's changes in the racing industry. There's more private barns around now and private facilities where those horses that once were housed there, that they're now housed elsewhere, not only in this area but other parts of the state. So I just wonder if there's some way we could work to change its purpose, to maybe expand its purpose so we can do other things out there.
Well, and I think that would be potentially a great resolution, but I think it's going to require a cash payment we're probably not willing to make. But as I'm looking at these, I guess at the how would we move forward from here, I don't think there's any question that we're going to always need a fence around this property. So I don't think we'll be wasting money by upgrading the fence from a chain link fence to a horse farm type fence. And I think when we start making those type of improvements, I believe this community will respond with the pontification and pondering, and they'll find more ways to use really a very beautiful 25-acre piece of property in the middle of our city that could have a lot more use for a lot more people. But as it sits now, as you can see in that picture, it's just not an inviting piece of property. I ride through there on a bicycle probably every 2 weeks, and there are times I ride through there and on pretty days and I don't see anybody other than me on the bicycle.
I also think we were talking about hiring a grant writer. This could be the first project of a grant writer, because there's a lot of parks grants and things out there that might help to fund that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think there will, what I'm seeing is that we tell the community, listen, we're going to give this first seed contribution. We know, well, we don't know. I would anticipate that we need probably $150,000 to $200,000 to put into this property. I think it's one of those pieces of property that a little bit the sky's the limit, but we don't have the limit. But for about, and Steve, you might inform the commissioners as to your estimates on fencing. It might make it look like I'm less wanting to spend all of it at one time.
Well, we looked at this issue pretty hard and even consulted with some contractors. If we went the very traditional style, we're looking at between $16 and $17 a running foot for a horse fence. Just sort of by way of reference, you have about 800 feet that goes across the front from Floral Hall over to Harrison Street. I think all told, you have, when you look at the exposure on 28th Street, the Harrison Street side, and the 30th Street side, you're every bit of 2,000 feet, 2,000 to 2,400 feet of fence. Run that out times $17, and you can see that you're in the $40,000, $50,000 range before you've added gates. So I think if you had $50,000 to spend on fencing, you could get pretty close to getting the job pretty close to done.
How much is, if we done something like this, how much is the cost of just the fencing? We're sitting over here with a jail full of Class D felons, and we're paying $16, $17 a foot. How much does it reduce if we have Class D felons, and those guys can put it in? I work with them at Brooks Stadium all summer long. They're good.
There's the only dollar that's in there was for painting.
For painting?
Mm-hmm.
So who's going to install the fence?
It'd be, well, that number includes, you have to buy materials. You're not going to get materials for free, and that's more than half the job.
I understand that, but I wonder how much labor is out of that $16, $17.
It's roughly half of it.
So if we done it ourselves, we'd cut it down to between $7 and $10.
Possibly. It depends on, sometimes there's really good qualified labor in the jail, sometimes there's not. So it really depends on how and if we can time that. It's possible.
I got to look at the timing on that and figure it out. If we can get it done for that makes it a whole lot more appetizing to me.
I intended to get out there this weekend and just couldn't get it done. I was going to walk the area and take a look at it, but there's a couple of things that need to go into the discussion. One of them is, of course, the
a horse-type fence, 4-rail, or we're talking about 4-rail.
We're talking 4-rail, traditional style, right at 60 inches.
60 inches, 5 feet. And so right now there's a fence that's more of a barrier fence that you can't, when they have, and I think the reason it's probably as it is when the fairs came and whatnot, people couldn't go to the back corner and jump over the fence or
It
crawl
has
under.
everything to do with crowd control at the fair. It really has nothing to do with the confinement of horses.
So we would need to understand that we would, unless we somehow or another put, well, of course I got electric fence around my pasture, but that might be frowned on.
Well, could you not put this fence around the fence that's already there? Or that-
Well, so when you're out there, especially the fence that is along 30th Street, we're talking some extremely old fabric. It's rusty. It's not attractive. It's wavy. It's not attractive at all. The chain, remember, it's not chain link. It's chain link with 3 strands of barbed wire. It was entirely about crowd control for a 1-week event, and it is not attractive.
I just think that's an unjustifiable reason to punish the rest of us for 51 weeks a year with that type of fence. When I look at how we were able to do crowd control at Barbecue Festival and at Music Fest.
I think you replace it with volunteers or temporary fencing or some other things. And then as sort of remembering back to my old days, even though they had chain link and 3 strands of barbed wire, there were areas where the fence got broken, kids snuck underneath. I'm not even sure it's all that effective how it works, because it's not being watched in its entirety all the time. So kids namely, figure out a way how to sneak into the fair.
Well, and I'm just saying that we would be giving up, in order to gain some appearance, to beautify the fence, we may be losing the function of excluding people, or where there's a charge for admittance there, we may be losing some money off of that. People can just step over or jump over the fence, that sort of thing. The other thing I know is, I can't picture how many houses there are, like along Monroe Street, I guess it would be, that use that fence probably as their back fence if they've got their backyard side fenced. And so we would be then going in and removing, of course, I think we could, but we'd be removing their, in essence, their back fence. And
Yeah, that comes very much in play on the Jefferson Street side. Many of the homes that front Jefferson Street, they have front and side yard fences that go back and touch our chain link. They're relying on that chain link as part of their enclosure.
Well, yeah, I think that would certainly need to look at that issue. I think those are probably less areas that are less apparent
Visible.
to the public, less visible to the public.
The visibility is along Joe Clifton, along Harrison, and then on 30th Street. So probably 2/3 or more of the park has the chain link is very visible.
Well, I certainly don't want to rush the issue, but I think that in the issue of trying to set funds aside, I think there is I think it's my read of PACRO that they would be willing to approve this application, and we could set this money aside for that purpose and be ready to spend it when we got the plan.
I'm okay with doing it, and I'm okay with using the PACRO money, but I want you to reword it to where we try to use our own people, Class D felons, or what have you. I mean, we got I think if we can save $20,000 or $25,000 and do it, we have to do it.
That makes sense to me. And I think the way that we would do it is to simply say, here's $50,000, here's what we want to use it on. I don't think PACRO requires the type of estimates or anything like that, so we could just get the money, have it on hand, and then we would spend it, the judge and Steve would supervise it being spent in the manner most efficient.
I agree with you 100%. We need to do something to improve the looks of Carson Park, but I still think we need to define its future use before we spend any money out there. I'd hate to spend $50,000 or $100,000 putting up new fence, and then after you still ride your bicycle through there and there's nobody out there. I think we need to try to increase its usage, and then once we define its usage, then we decide what kind of fence we want to put up. If we have to have it for security, obviously this fence would be difficult to make it work. But again, I agree with you 100%. We need to do something to improve the looks, but we also need to do something to improve its usage, and that may require trying to at least get that one clause in the deed restriction changed to be able to open it up for other uses, because right now it's underutilized, and I think it's a gem for the city where it's located, but and the county, but I think it's just not being utilized the way it could, and that's because of the restrictions that exist.
Well,
Again,
I think I've got less concern really about those deed restrictions, and maybe some do. The lease says to be used for for exclusively public purposes as follows. To be used for our fairgrounds, for holding county fairs, exhibits of livestock and farm products, and for the training, exercise, exhibiting, and racing of the light breeds of horses and ponies, and for horse shows. And it is being used for that. It's being used not very often and not exclusively, but this deed does not require that it be exclusively. And of course, it's not. And there's all kinds of things that it's used for, but it does need to be used for more things. And I think I don't think we have a problem until we decide we're no longer going to use it for these things. And maybe even if we add just infrequent use of those, would still comply with the requirements of that deed. So I'm not too concerned about us getting into legal jeopardy over using it for lots and lots of other things, 90% things other than this, as long as we're doing these things that are.
I think as long as we've
got 3 events already, and probably more, but I know we got the rodeo is already booked for next year, correct, Steve? And then we've got 2 big events in May, correct, that are not livestock driven. So I booked one the other day. You may not have seen it, Vicky. Okay. So I think you're on the right track, and just like I said, save as much money as we can doing it.
I agree. And I think Phil, I think we're just kind of stuck with the farm feature, and I don't know if that's a bad thing. I mean, I think honestly, as we expand on that, I think it sounds like a wonderful spot for farmers market. I know we have one downtown, but we might actually have the ability to offer a farmers market annex, or based upon the city's plans, they may need another spot for their farmers market. And I think this is a perfect spot for a farmers market. And I think there is, I've talked to the Department of Local Government. They don't have great grant programs for this, although Judge and I both had a conversation with Amy Barnes, and she had interest in this project and committed to us that she would help us look for additional grant money. I guess I'd like to have this in front of PACRO in November, and so I would make a motion that we, before the PACRO meeting, submit an application to PACRO to designate $50,000 for the improvement project generally at Carson Park.
All right, there's a motion.
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? The motion is to submit to PACRO a request for $50,000 for improvements.
Improvements for Carson Park.
So,
And
not specifying fence or building or whatever, just then we'd have the discretion of using it how we wanted to.
right, it'd have to be on Carson Park, but then I think they would leave it up to us to then come back and show, or we would decide how we're going to implement the fence and use the money. And we're going to need more money. But I believe if we get this $50,000 of basically seed money, I believe it will be in a better shape to raise money.
Do you, we don't think that we need to be, you, I guess, talked with PACRO, I haven't, but you think just the request for $50,000 for improvements is specific enough for them to say okay, or has the talk been about a fence in particular?
I think if we just listed improvements, I believe PACRO will be fine with it, be my guess.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
I'm going to vote against that motion when it comes to the floor for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think we need to do more planning on what we're going to do out there rather than just approve this at this point. I also think the PACRO money, the intent of that is for more direct job creation. I'm not sure that spending $50,000 of PACRO money on Carson Park is going to create jobs. I'm concerned at some point when it comes down to redeveloping the land at the energy plant, that we're not going to have money available to do incentives out there. And this PACRO money, the intent of it when it was started was to help create jobs. And again, I'm repeating myself, but I'm not sure that this will create jobs. Again, I totally support what you want to do. At this point, until we have a plan together, I'm not in favor of asking for PACRO money to do that. I think we need to do more planning. We need to try to, even if we don't have to change the deed, we need to have a master plan of some sort on how we're going to use Carson Park. I don't want to just put up a new fence and then it not be utilized any more than what it is. I'm not sure that the look of the fence is stopping people from using it. I think what's stopping people from using it is that we haven't promoted it in a way and made it available and tried to identify outside the box opportunities for it. So when it comes to a vote, I'd request a roll call vote on it.
Okay. Anything else? Let me say, I understand the impetus behind the motion. I think it's a really has a lot of potential, and it's unique in that I think that it's the only piece of property that McCracken County owns that's within the city, particularly in the structure that it is, even with all the rezoning. I mean I'm gonna look for it. Where they're grabbing our land.
The annexation. The annexation. They didn't hear that
I
at
couldn't
all.
grab it. I couldn't come up with a word, but even with all the annexation, this has long been since, like, what is it, 1937 or something, I think. But
Let me add one further comment too. We have some
I'm
other.
not done just yet.
I'm sorry.
And so we are, I think, on the cusp of hiring a grant writer, and possibly this person would have a planning background as well. I think there is the possibility, and like you say, we talked with, is that her name, Amy?
Amy
That
Barnes.
works for the Department of Local
Government.
Yeah. She did show an interest. I would hate to take 50,000, even though we have 400, take 50,000 out of PACRO money that could be used for other things, and then find that we could get a grant to do all or most of all what we wanted. And so I don't know that we're in a tremendous hurry to get this project done. So I think there's a potential downside of us saying, shoot, if we'd have waited, this grant would have taken care of this, and by getting 50 from PACRO, when we go to DLG, they might say, well, you've already gotten some money to do that, and maybe it would lessen our position on getting the grant money. So I think maybe it would be wise personally to wait a bit and see on it. But which was
Yeah, I just want to make one more, and again, I don't want to. I totally agree with your motivation of what you want to do. I agree that if we're going to hire a grant writer, and at some point we may need seed money to get a bigger grant, maybe to do the whole project. It could be that if we wait, this $50,000, if we decide we want to do that, could be seed money, maybe to get several $100,000 in grant money for matching funds. I think we have other projects that we're probably going to be considering that we might need PACRO funds for. And I'd like to make a motion, we table the motion.
Well, I guess I'm reminded of the parable of the talents. We've got 25 acres. It's no debt on it. We've got money available. Can I make a direct tie that this is going to create jobs? No, but I guess I liken it to if you were looking at a college campus for your child, and you drove down 28th Street and you saw this structure. It's probably, you might not notice it, you might not say, oh, but if you saw something that looked like a horse farm, you'd say, oh, this is a place I want to live. And I think that is an important part of community development. That's typically the part that is played by the city. But the city doesn't own this, that we own it. And I think we have a responsibility to be good neighbors and make this property look like something that it should look like in the city, so that when people do drive by it, they get that, oh, look, I'm next to a horse farm too. But if we've advanced the conversation a little bit, and maybe we have, I'll chop that, I'll live with that, and we'll keep thinking about it.
So there's a motion to table a motion. Do we want to vote on tabling, or are you wanting to withdraw the motion?
Motion to table.
Oh, we haven't had a second on it. Is there a second to table the motion?
Well, I'll second it because I don't think I'm going to win.
I think you're right. Any discussion on tabling the motion there? All in favor of tabling motion?
I'll say aye.
Aye. Aye.
I'll bring it. I'll probably be bringing it up again.
Opposed?
It'll be back on the agenda the next time.
Okay. Is there opposition to tabling?
You got 3 votes for yes, so I voted, we're okay.
Okay, all right. All right, then let's see, on another, we had Kyle Pote on, but he's, for Department of Transportation, I'm told he's out of town, can't make it, so we'll see about getting him maybe. Oh, he's already scheduled, okay, for the next, okay. Now, we've got on discussion opioid litigation. However, given the substance of that, I think that it would be wise to do that in a closed session. It's certainly a legal matter. It concerns whether we want to remain in this class of negotiating plaintiffs, or if we want to withdraw and go on our own. It would seem to me that we could have more frank and open discussions, and certainly we're within our rights to have it in executive session. So
I'm going to ask we go into executive session for a couple of other things and talk to Mr. Wilcox. So I think that would be wise. Maybe we can get through the rest of this pretty quickly here. I know we've got company there.
Okay. So you're going to make a motion to place that, remove it from discussion, put it on executive session?
Yes.
And
I'll second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, we'll move that. Let's see, we've got Emily Rourke here that's going to talk to us about that. So we'll, and Ms. Rourke, we're going to, I don't think, be too awful long to be in executive session. Because I know you bill high by the hour, so we don't want you sitting out there too long. And worth every penny, I might say. Okay. Let's see, was any old business or previously tabled items that we need? I don't know anything we're going to bring up. Court orders that were not on the consent agenda.
Ready?
Ready? Yep.
It is ordered to pay Ziva Graphics the sum of $280 for the additional work on the county's updated website.
So made.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Granted.
It is ordered to pay the November 5th, 2019 general election precinct workers for training and working the polls.
So made.
Second.
Now, I didn't ask for discussion on that. If there's any discussion anybody wants on these things, holler and we'll discuss it. But all in favor is aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries.
It is ordered to pay the November 5th, 2019 general election precinct location rental fees.
So moved.
Second.
Now, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Carries.
It is ordered that $62,500 be paid to the Greater Paducah Economic Development, same being the second quarter budget allocation for fiscal year 2019-2020.
Okay. All in favor, aye.
I want to move that we table this
No.
to our next meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, who made the motion first, though?
I don't know that anybody had made a motion to.
So you want to go straight to table? Okay.
Wait, hold on. I move we pass over item D to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
That's fine.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Motion to pass it over to the next fiscal court meeting. Okay.
Aye.
That's your motion.
got it.
Yeah, I'm voting.
Your motion.
He seconded.
And I seconded it.
Have we
Okay.
voted on it?
No,
Yeah,
we
you
haven't.
didn't vote on it.
Well, any discussion on that?
Well, I do want to communicate, Bruce, I appreciate you being here tonight. One of the things that the last time this came up, we kind of I felt we made a commitment that we wouldn't make another payment until we had a contract for services with GPED. I don't think that's going to be hopefully it won't be difficult. I do think there are some expectations that we want out of the contract, one of which is quarterly reports and meetings with the director, and I realize you just started about 30 days ago. So thank you for being here, but I believe the Constitution, in fact, requires us, because of the framework of GPED, to have this contract for services, because we have a duty to monitor public funds, and the only way we can really do that is to enter into a contract where GPED provides the county economic development services. So that's the primary reason I want to do that.
Now, it says if that would be the second quarter budget allocation. Would that be when the second quarter of
The second quarter started in October.
the second quarter started in October, okay, this month. And we pay it at the front of the,
Beginning of the quarter.
okay. All right. So that would then be, what are we, November 13? Is that our next meeting? So we would be delaying the payment from, what's this, October 28th, so for 2 weeks roughly. Yep.
And to expand on what Commissioner Jones said, we were reminded by the Deputy Judge Executive a couple months ago that we have to have contracts when we allocate funds like this. We had to do it for the recreation activities at Lone Oak, Heath, and Reedland, and we had to do it with others, but we have to have a contract for services for us to legally allocate those funds. And I think there needs to be an aggressive effort over the next couple of weeks to get that contract negotiated. I think Commissioner Jones has some issues he'd like to put in that, but again, we have to have a contract to allocate those funds. We haven't in the past, and it has violated what the Deputy Judge reminded us of a couple months ago.
And I don't want to pass up an opportunity to say, while you're here, Bruce, that I think most of us feel that it would be a better business model for GPED to include a county commissioner on the board of directors and a city commissioner on the board of directors to match the amount of public voice in comparison to the amount of public dollars.
All right, so the motion is to pass this to the next meeting. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, carries.
It is ordered that $19,256.93 be paid to the McCracken County Sheriff's Drug Fund, same being insurance claim reimbursed for a total loss of the 2018 Nissan Maxima, which was a forfeiture car.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion?
Does that mean we purchased it, the car was purchased with drug funds, or was it confiscated?
Just a slight error.
Can you come up here? Was it, my question was it purchased with drug funds, or was it?
It wasn't a forfeiture. I purchased that out of my drug account. The vehicle was totaled, and the insurance check is being written to McCracken County Fiscal Court, and pursuant to a new KRS that went into effect either June or July of this year. Whatever funds that was purchased from, that's where the money should go.
Was that being used for by the drug officers?
Yes.
And then they were in a crash and
Yes.
crashed it. Hopefully nobody was hurt.
No.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I just couldn't tell from the way that was worded whether or not the car was forfeited or whether it was paid for with forfeited funds, but you've clarified that. Thank you.
Any? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Carries.
It is ordered that up to $28,125 be paid to New World, a Tyler Public Safety Solutions, same being payment for new dispatch messaging equipment and training.
So made.
Second.
Can we have an explanation of what that is?
So 911 purchased new computer-aided dispatch, which impacts the sheriff's department. And so the department did good work to pare through that proposal and get just the essential elements that we need to receive data in the cars from dispatch. I think it started considerably higher, like over 50,000. They got it worked down to just 28, so that our officers have mobile data terminals in their car, and this is the new system that provides that communication. And then there's some enhancements that didn't exist before, like automatic vehicle locator. So that's a nice officer safety feature that comes with this. This isn't really something we chose. This was the old system that was owned by the previous 911 fell in, it just became technically obsolete and didn't work with our equipment anymore. So this was a $1.5 million system that the city selected and paid for, and this is just the annual licensure so that it works with for the sheriff's department.
Thank you.
Did you say it's the annual, just for the license? It's not for any equipment, or?
No equipment.
It says it's for training and equipment.
Well, training, and there is some minimal hardware pieces that we had to purchase to make it work, but it's primarily licensing. So we're adding it to our 911 budget.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries.
It is ordered that the McCracken County Sheriff's Office enter into an annual contract with the Government Utilities Technology Service Incorporated to provide online search and viewing of 2019 McCracken County property tax bills. Total upfront cost and support services are $1,035.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Carries. And we've got an one ordinance, second reading of an ordinance.
It is hereby ordered that pursuant to KRS Chapter 67, the second reading of ordinance 2019-12 shall be conducted in a summary format as follows. An ordinance amending McCracken County Ordinance Number 2019-5 by making revisions to the McCracken County Administrative Code pertaining to provisions in the following areas: pay periods and vacation leave. Present summary makes the following revisions to the McCracken County Administrative Code within Chapter 5 entitled Policies and Procedures. Modification of existing language in the section entitled Pay Period pertaining to the reoccurring pay period for the McCracken County employees, and modification of existing language in the section entitled Vacation regarding service time and the accumulation of vacation days and incremental use. It is hereby certified by the McCracken County Fiscal Court that the present summary represents an accurate and official statement of the main points and contents of the ordinance number 2019-12. Ordinance number 2019-12 shall be available for public inspection in its whole and complete form in the McCracken County Judge Executive's office during ordinary business hours.
So move.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That carries. And then one resolution.
Resolution number 2019-7, it is hereby ordered that Resolution 2019-7 be adopted and enacted authorizing the filing of a Regional Development Agency Assistance Program, RDAAP, proposal grant application for $130,000 in RDAAP funds with the Department of Local Government to be used to excavate 100 acres at I-24 Park and wetland delineation at the Triple Rail site, and authorizing the Paducah McCracken Industrial Development Authority to act as the authorized correspondent for this project.
So made.
Second.
Any discussion?
Is this a matching grant?
Yeah. It is. I'm opposed to this, and I'll tell you why I am opposed to it, because I don't think it is a matching grant. This is the use of, it's my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this is the use of the TVA property tax money that would come to the county because TVA is in the county. In lieu of paying property taxes, this is that program. Some of that money goes into our general fund, but 2 years ago, the governor said we're going to create it. We're going to give you the rest of the TVA money because they used to keep it. But here's the deal. You have to use it for economic development, and to help make sure you use it for economic development, we're going to write the check to, you have to designate an authority, an industrial development authority. And if you don't do that every year, in fact, you forfeit the money. We did that, I guess, a couple meetings ago.
We've done it for 2 years.
Yeah, and we've got to do that every year, apparently. I still don't understand that kind of get you government rule, but that's the rule. But my problem is, I'm all for this. In fact, Bruce, I think on your very first day of employment, I wrote you a letter, said I'm all for this. This is a good idea. We ought to do this. But here's the rub. We're using 100% of county dollars to improve a piece of property that we're in partnership with the city. The I-24 Park is in the city. We would get property tax proceeds from some development from this, although we would probably end up using the property tax as an incentive. We've got an agreement to share the revenue, occupational tax on this property that expires in a couple of years. And I just think if we're going to do this, A, we either need to share the cost with the city 50-50, or B, we need to extend the revenue sharing agreement in an amount that makes it equitable. This does not need to be 100% our responsibility.
Maybe am I understanding it wrong? I thought we were taking 100 acres of wetlands at the Triple Rail mega site and excavating it over at the I-24 Park to free up that land, or is it?
Couple things. First, yes, so most of the TVA in lieu of prop tax comes directly into our general fund. there was a little sliver the state used to reserve for itself, and through the leadership of the governor and the legislature, they changed that back to, no, you can keep the dollars local, but you have to funnel it through an industrial development authority for the purpose of economic development. We do have an industrial development authority here. It's a joint board between the city and county, and they do own a significant asset, the I-24 park. So some of the money is to address some nagging old issues there with regard to some cleanup and some accumulation of brush, and it's just not attractive, and it would be useful to Bruce to get that more attractive. The second part had to do with the Triple Rail Park, where there was a wetlands delineation study that lapsed, and so there's a few bucks available to get that study back up to date, so that when Bruce is recruiting companies, and it came up with the last major recruitment, and they asked for this piece, and we were a little embarrassed because that information had been allowed to lapse. So we're using some dollars to correct that problem. The revenue sharing agreement, the two parties in that deal, that's the city and county. It doesn't really involve the IDA. It's really an agreement that was reached between the city and the county. And so really what we need to do is approach city government and say we have an interest in extending those. How this helps or hurts that, I'm not entirely sure, but it didn't. The revenue sharing agreement really didn't have the IDA as a party to that agreement, because we don't share revenue with the IDA. It's just the taxes the city collects, they share with the county.
As I understood, and I went to the training on this back in August, I mean, we can designate this IDA, or we can make another IDA, and we can designate two IDAs. It's not, this money does not belong to the IDA. It belongs to the fiscal court to be spent as we see fit, and it is simply passed through the IDA to ensure there's I guess the Department of Local Government gets a check mark, a way to check to make sure that we're not putting this into the general fund, that it actually is going into economic development. So I guess.
But we at this point we do not have another IDA. We just have the one that's associated with the I-24 park.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess so. If we just back it out, would we take money out of our general fund and say, all right, we'll do this, or would we want the city to match us on this if it were out of our general fund? And I don't see the difference in these funds if this is truly money that belongs to the county to spend and is money that is collected because of property that is located in the county.
We also were dealing with some deadlines that we were trying to address as well.
What are those?
Well, we had to do the previous action 2 weeks ago, and then this was the identify what you're going to use the money for.
I guess from the training I got in August is this money can continue to roll over and accumulate.
That's true, because I believe last year's money did just roll and accumulate. They just filed for it and got it designated but did not spend it.
Yeah. And frankly, I've had conversations with the mayor, and I got the impression the city would, or at least 1/5 of the city, would be interested in some way of, I think they get it, that this is something that they should share half of if we're going to do it in the I-24 park. And we can make it even on, I realize some of this is for the wetland. I think that's only about $25,000.
I don't remember what the rent
For the study?
Yeah, we can use the TVA money for that, and they can forgive. They've got a $900,000 mortgage on that, which we've forgiven $500,000.
Right.
And I'm still not sure why we did that, but that's long before I came. They could, the way we could just make it fair is they forgive their half on that mortgage, or they could pay half. I mean, but they have a mortgage on. We're not talking about property that they're not interested in. They actually have a mortgage on this property, right? That's
on the
GPAD.
triple rail?
On the triple rail site, that's property owned by GPAD.
Correct.
So we're at least 50-50 with the city on GPAD. So I guess I'm trying to understand why we would pay all of this expense instead of asking the city to pay half of it. And if I'm not thinking right, I'm happy to look at it a different way.
Well, I guess the way I looked at it was it didn't require either body to dig into their general funds, because we could not. This wasn't the TVA money that we just put straight into Gen Fund. This was the RDAP money that was reserved or certainly restricted for the IDA and related economic development uses.
I mean, in theory, what we could do with this money is we could create another IDA and buy a completely different property that we're not in partnership with either GPED or the city. And if we can do that, then I think we have an obligation to say, listen, I think we should only carry our percentage of the pail of water. And I think we're carrying the whole bucket on this one. And so I'm opposed to it.
Okay.
But I'm opposed to it in this form.
To the wetlands delineation and getting that done, I believe that is
I think we
strongly
gotta
in the
get that
county's
done.
interest to get that done.
That does sound more important, and I could be persuaded, even though I still think the same argument applies. But if there's a deadline and there's some reason to have that done, I'll have less objection to that because the amount is less. But it's still us carrying the whole bucket, and we have more partners that should be helping us carry that bucket. And I think they're willing to carry the bucket.
So can we reword this to pay for that? And let the rest of it roll over for now until we talk to the city?
I don't know. You tell me where you want to go, and we'll make it
What's our
happen.
deadline? What do we have with the wetlands? Is there some?
Well, there's not a deadline per se. It's as Bruce talks to clients and they ask that very critical component in that part of the county. It would be very nice and professional of us if he had that information at his fingertips that could be relied upon in a land deal.
But it's the same thing as us giving an additional $25,000 to GPED. I can't see how the math is different. I mean, this is money we could spend on something that we're not in partnership with GPED. So I think this truly does up our contribution. I'm not opposed to it. I want a credit somewhere else with the other partners.
The city, for whatever economic development will happen out there, they don't have a tax imposed on that property since it is well outside the city limits. While the city had supplied half of the cash to make the purchase, they didn't have or have a direct deal with the county to say, how do we get our money back? They went out on that limb.
I can be persuaded on the $25,000 for the wetlands delineation, but if there's a way to carve that out, or if we can just come back in 2 weeks from now, maybe if we come back in 2 weeks from now, we'll have an agreement with the city that works it all out.
I'll be November 13th. Well, yeah, November 13th before we meet again.
Yeah. Well, we're for 2 weeks. So,
You want to table this item generally, see if we can work some of that out?
I mean, unless there's some economic opportunity we're going to miss by tabling it, I'd rather table it and get it done right.
How would you know?
Bruce would have to tell me.
What if he gets a call the next week? We're sitting here on the
It's
top.
fine to wait.
well,
Okay.
so the motion to table it, and so if we table it, then we can, Steve or Bruce or I, or maybe all three, talk to the city, see if we work something out and get something a little more equitable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for getting the work done. I just want the path to get there to be the fairest way to the county.
Okay. The clerk's getting ready to tell me I don't have a second on the motion to table.
Second.
Who was the first? The clerk missed that.
Oh,
Oh, thank
Eddie.
you.
Okay.
Eddie made it first.
Okay.
Yeah. Any further discussion? On favor, aye. On table? Table.
And then if an agreement isn't worked out on that, you'll come back with the $25,000 project, the other mitigation.
Let's be optimistic we'll get as much of, yeah, we'll get at least that.
Everything will be just fine.
Yeah, I know.
Now, we're down to executive session. Did we say we were wanting to
Yes.
talk with Chief Head in
Chief
executive
Head
session
and-
also?
Emily first, then G-Fed.
Yeah. All right.
And for a personnel matter.
Okay, so,
Checking all the boxes.
All about.
well, I don't think it's them all, but it gets several of them. Let's see. All right, so we've got, I guess, that would be number one, check. Future sale or acquisition of a specific parcel of real estate is permitted by KRS 618101B. Proposed or pending litigation, that's Wright Firm. What was the personnel
Personnel action.
under item 3? That's about collective bargaining with public employees.
Leads to the appointment of.
Oh, I see, okay. Not 3, but 4. Issues which might lead to the appointment, dismissal, or disciplining of an employee is permitted by KRS 618101F. Not 5, and not 6. So 1, 2, and 4 on our checklist. And who made the motion?
I did.
Second.
Parker and Bartleman, second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right. Carries. And so I think maybe we can do the thing with the litigation. Hopefully it won't take too long. Can you stick with us, Bruce, for just a little bit? We'll come out of that. Hopefully yours won't take too long either, but ladies first. All right, so we'll adjourn to, or recess to executive session. And we're not going to, is there going to be some action, Steve, we're going to take on any of this? Not the employee either? Okay, all right, so if y'all want to cut and
I'll
run.
make the motion, Eddie a second. We'll all be.
I got that little form you just filled out.
Yeah.
Thank you,